A homeless teacher signed a marriage contract with a cold CEO 7 days later. He broke every rule for her. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us get back to today's main character. The rain over Chicago had not stopped for 3 days. The city lights bled through the glass walls of Hale Tower, painting the conference room in silver and blue. At the far end of a long table sat Adrian Vale, CEO of Vale Industries, a man whose reputation had been built on control. Across from him, wrapped in a second-hand coat that did not belong in this world of marble and chrome, sat Elara Brooks. The contract between them was already signed. The paper still smelled faintly of ink. Adrian leaned back in his chair, eyes steady, voice even. 7 days, he said. No questions about my life, no affection, no interference, no public mistakes. At the end, you walk away. Elara nodded once, her fingers still pressed against the pen. I understand. Her voice was quiet, but not weak. It carried the tone of someone who had survived too much to fear silence. He studied her. You were a teacher? Yes, she said, until the funding cuts closed the school. After that, I taught whoever was left under the bridge. There was no apology in her tone, only fact. Outside the window, thunder rolled across Lake Michigan. The reflection of the storm moved over their faces, two strangers bound by necessity. Adrian spoke again, slower this time. This is not charity, Miss Brooks. It is an arrangement. You will help me appear stable during a crucial merger. In exchange, I will fund your community shelter for the next 3 years. When the week is over, we owe nothing to each other. Elara met his gaze. You mean, when the week is over, we go back to pretending we do not exist? A flicker of something passed through his eyes, regret, maybe, or the echo of recognition. Pretending keeps the world turning, he said. She gave a small smile. Then you must be very tired. For a moment, neither of them moved. The sound of rain against the glass filled the space between words. Adrian finally rose, closed the folder, and extended his hand. Welcome to your new life, Mrs. Vale. The title landed like a weight in the air. She shook his hand, her palm cold but steady. When the elevator doors opened, the lights of the city spread out below them like a field of stars. The building's glass facade reflected their silhouettes, his tall, precise, untouchable, hers small, human, real. They walked side by side but miles apart in spirit. In the lobby she stopped. What happens now? You will be driven to the residence, he replied. My staff will brief you. Dinner is at 8. He turned away before she could answer, already swallowed by the hum of polished shoes and distant elevators. Elara stood alone for a moment, watching the rain stream down the glass like melted silver. She reached into her bag and touched a small piece of white chalk, one she always kept from her teaching days. It left a faint mark on her thumb, a reminder of something pure, something she could still hold on to. As she stepped outside, the wind tore at her coat, and the city smelled of wet asphalt and cold ambition. A black car waited at the curb, headlights glowing through the mist. She climbed in without a word. From the back seat, she looked up at Hale Tower disappearing into the clouds. Somewhere inside, a man who had built his life out of rules was preparing to test every one of them. And somewhere beneath the same storm, a woman with nothing left but kindness was about to change what love meant to a man who no longer believed in it. The driver asked quietly, "Home, ma'am?" She looked out at the skyline, 1,000 windows gleaming like promises made of glass. "No," she said softly. "Not yet. Heavy." The car pulled away, its reflection fading in the rain, leaving behind the faintest sound of thunder like the first heartbeat of a story that did not know it was already beginning. The drive from the city to Adrian Vale's residence took less than an hour, but to Elara Brooks, it felt like crossing an invisible border. The skyline faded into mist, replaced by clean streets and silent security gates. When the car stopped, she saw the house for the first time. It was not a home. It was a fortress made of glass and steel, rising above a lake that mirrored the stormy sky. Every surface shone like it was designed to reflect, not to welcome. The front doors opened before she could reach for the handle. A woman in a gray uniform bowed slightly. "Welcome, Mrs. Vale." Please, come inside. Her voice was calm, her smile practiced. Elara followed through the vast entryway. The air smelled faintly of cedar and polished stone. Every step echoed. The walls were lined with modern art that looked more like mathematical diagrams than expressions of feeling. She could hear her own breathing louder than the wind outside. Adrian was waiting in the foyer, dressed in a dark suit, his expression unreadable. "You arrived on time," he said. "That is a good start." She nodded. "Your assistant told me dinner is at 8. "Dinner," he confirmed. "Breakfast at 7, lunch at 1. You will receive a printed schedule each morning. It is not flexible." He walked ahead, and she followed through a corridor of mirrors. Their reflections trailed behind them like ghosts. He stopped at a wide staircase and pointed toward the second floor. "Your room is to the left. Mine is to the right. The west wing is restricted. You will not go there under any circumstance." "Understood," she said. He glanced back at her suitcase, modest and worn. "That will be all you need. The staff will deliver whatever else is required." When he turned away, she felt the strange stillness of being observed and unseen at the same time. It was the kind of silence that did not simply fill a space, it watched it. Upstairs, her room looked like a catalog photograph. White sheets, gray curtains, no scent, no history. On the nightstand lay a folded card written in his exact handwriting. It read, "Rule number 1, no emotion. Rule number 2, no interference. Rule number 3, appearances first. Rule number 4, speak only when necessary. Rule number 5, walk away clean." She held the card for a long moment, then placed it back carefully. The sound of thunder rolled through the glass walls. At dinner, the table stretched between them like a frozen river. 2 plates, 2 glasses, too much distance. The only sound was the faint ticking of a wall clock. Adrian ate with measured precision, never looking up. Elara took a sip of water and said softly, "Your house is very quiet." "Emser, noise invites distraction," he answered without emotion. "I prefer clarity." "Clarity can feel a lot like loneliness," she replied. His knife paused for a second, then continued. "Loneliness is efficient." The conversation ended there. After the meal, she wandered through the main hall, her footsteps soft on the marble floor. A piano stood near the window, its lid closed, its keys covered in dust. She brushed a finger across it, leaving a faint line. For a moment, she imagined the sound that might still live inside, waiting. Behind her, Adrian's voice broke the silence. "That piano is not in use." She turned. "It seems a shame to keep it silent." He met her eyes briefly. "Silence is what keeps this house from falling apart." Then he walked away, leaving her alone with the echo of his words. Later that night, Elara stood by the window in her room. The city lights shimmered far in the distance, unreachable behind the storm. She took out the piece of chalk she had carried for years and drew a tiny mark on the corner of the glass. It was faint, almost invisible, but it was there a reminder that something human still existed in this immaculate cage. She whispered to herself, "If I can leave one mark, maybe I am not completely erased." Down the hall, Adrian stood by his office window, unaware of the small white smudge on the glass above her room. His world was silent, calculated, and precise, but somewhere below that perfection, a quiet defiance had already begun. The mansion remained still, but for the first time in years, the silence did not feel safe. It felt alive. Morning arrived without sound. The glass walls of the Vale residence caught the first light of dawn, but inside, everything remained in perfect stillness. Elara Brooks woke before the alarms, out of habit more than rest. Years of teaching had given her an inner clock that did not obey comfort. She made her bed with precision, washed her face in cold water, and tied her hair back before stepping into the hallway. The mansion was already awake in its own mechanical rhythm. Lights flickered on at exact intervals. The staff moved like quiet patterns, carrying trays, adjusting flowers, never speaking unless spoken to. Every sound, every movement felt rehearsed. Elara walked toward the dining room and found Adrian Vale seated at the far end of the same long table. The morning sunlight fell across his suit like glass cutting through water. He was reading a folder, eyes fixed, shoulders straight. "Good morning," she said gently. He did not look up. "Please, sit." Saturday. The breakfast was flawless. Fruit cut into precise cubes, coffee poured to the same level on both sides. The silence was heavy, filled with the sound of knives touching porcelain. After a moment, he closed the folder. "How was your first night?" "It was quiet," she said. "Almost too quiet." He gave a short nod. "That is the point." She studied him for a moment. "Do you always live by schedules and rules?" "Yes," he answered. "They keep everything functional." "And human?" she asked. He looked up for the first time that morning. His eyes were sharp, cold, unreadable. "Humanity is unpredictable. I do not trade in chance." She smiled faintly. "That must make life very safe." He leaned back slightly. "Safety is underrated." The conversation ended with the scrape of a chair. He stood, collected his folder, and left the room without another word. Elara finished her coffee alone. When she looked toward the window, her reflection seemed small against the wall of glass, a reminder of how easy it was to disappear in this place. Later that day, she explored the lower floors. Behind the kitchen, she found a narrow storage room where the cleaning staff kept supplies. On a dusty shelf, she saw a forgotten whiteboard, its surface scratched and dull. She pulled it out, wiped it clean, and smiled. When the house quieted for the afternoon, she gathered a few of the younger staff members and began teaching them English phrases and reading exercises. Their laughter was hesitant at first, then warm, echoing faintly through the corridor. An hour later, Adrian appeared at the doorway. The sound of his shoes against the marble silenced everyone. "What is this?" he asked calmly. One of the maids lowered her eyes. "Mrs. Vale was helping us learn," he interrupted, his gaze fixed on Elara. "You are interfering with work schedules." She stood straight. "They were on a break. I thought it would be useful." "Useful," he repeated. "This house does not run on improvisation. They are people, not machines," she said. "They could use a little noise." His expression did not change, but his voice dropped lower. "Noise invites mistakes. You, of all people, should understand structure." She looked at him steadily. "Structure does not have to mean silence." The air between them tightened, a collision of two worlds that did not speak the same language. After a long pause, he turned away. "End this lesson, now." The staff scattered. Elara stood alone by the whiteboard, her hand still holding the marker. She drew one small line across the corner of the board, a single streak of color in the perfect gray of the mansion. That evening, she found herself in the greenhouse behind the west courtyard. It was smaller than she expected, tucked behind a wall of glass and iron. Inside, the air was warm and alive. Plants grew in quiet rebellion against the sterile perfection of the rest of the house. She exhaled slowly, feeling her shoulders drop for the first time in days. When she reached for the watering can, she noticed movement behind her reflection. Adrian was standing at the doorway. "I did not know anyone still came here," she said. "I do not," he replied. "That room serves no practical purpose." "It serves peace," she said. "That is a purpose." He watched her for a moment, unreadable again. "Peace is temporary." She smiled softly. "So is everything worth feeling." For a second, his composure shifted. Then he turned to leave. "Do not stay too long," he said. "The humidity affects the walls." When he was gone, she whispered, "Maybe they need to breathe too." "Yeah." Night returned, folding over the glass house like a heavy curtain. From his office, Adrian stood by the window, watching her faint outline move among the plants. He could not hear her, but something about her steadiness unsettled him. It reminded him of music, something simple, human, and uninvited. In her room, Elara opened a small notebook she had carried since her teaching days. She wrote a single line before closing it again. Even glass cracks when it forgets what it was made for. Outside, the lights of the mansion glimmered like a cage of stars. Inside, two people lived under the same roof, bound by a contract of silence that had already begun to break. The next morning began with rain again. The sound fell softly against the walls of glass, turning the Vale residence into a world of blurred reflections. Elara Brooks woke early, drawn back to the greenhouse she had discovered the day before. The rest of the house was still asleep, its silence heavy and predictable. She slipped on a sweater and walked through the long hallway until she reached the door that led outside. Inside the greenhouse, the air was warmer, damp with the smell of soil and leaves. The light was muted, filtered through misted panels. She breathed deeply, the first real breath she had taken since moving into this house. The plants here were thriving in a quiet chaos. Some vines crawled up the metal beams. Others reached toward the faint light like they were searching for freedom. She knelt beside a dying fern, brushed the dirt from its pot, and whispered, "You just need time." Her voice broke the stillness like a ripple. Behind her, a low voice answered, "Time does not fix everything." She turned. Adrian Vale was standing in the doorway, coat unbuttoned, hair slightly disheveled from the morning wind. His presence filled the small space, not with authority, but with tension that did not yet know what to do with itself. "I did not expect you to be here," she said. "I was reviewing documents in my office," he replied. "I saw movement on the security monitor. You should have informed me before entering this area." She smiled faintly. "I did not know breathing required permission." His eyes narrowed slightly, but he said nothing. He stepped inside, and the glass door closed behind him. For a moment, the storm outside faded to a hush, leaving only the sound of their voices and the rain sliding down the panels above them. "You keep this place alive," she said. "Why?" He looked around, his gaze landing on the rows of orchids and lilies. "It was built by the previous owner. The automatic systems maintain it. I see no reason to remove it." "That is not what I asked," she said softly. He turned toward her, his voice measured. "Because it is the only part of this house that does not ask questions." Elara stood slowly, brushing dirt from her hands. "Then maybe that is why everything else feels dead." Something shifted in his expression, a flicker of something human, gone before it could settle. "You think I do not feel? I think you have forgotten how to let yourself feel," she said. He stepped closer, his tone controlled but quieter now. "Emotions are costly. They make people weak. Only if you use them as armor," she replied. "If you let them breathe, they heal." Her words hung in the air like the scent of rain. Neither of them moved. The only sound was the steady drop of water against the glass. Finally, Adrian looked away. "You should not speak as if you understand me." "I do not," she admitted. "But I see you." He blinked, almost startled by the simplicity of it. Elara turned back to the plants, her fingers tracing a green stem. "This room is alive because it allows change. You built your house to resist it. That must be exhausting." He said nothing, but his breathing had changed slower, heavier. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet. "This house is built to last." "Nothing that lives wants to last," she said. "It just wants to grow." For the first time, he had no answer. The silence stretched, not cold this time, but heavy with recognition. When she left the greenhouse, he stayed behind. Adrian walked through the rows of plants, touching one leaf, then another, as if confirming they were real. His hand paused over the fern she had tended. The smallest hint of green was visible at its root. He stood there for a long time before returning inside. That evening, dinner passed with fewer words than usual, but the air felt different. Elara noticed that he no longer read documents at the table. He ate slower, as if thinking. Halfway through the meal, she said quietly, "You know, I found something that actually breathes in this house." He looked up. "The greenhouse." She smiled. "You already knew." "I built the systems myself," he said. "I understand function." "You understand control," she corrected. "Not life." His gaze lingered on her face for a moment longer than before. Then he stood and said softly, "Perhaps they are the same thing." When he left, she exhaled, realizing she had been holding her breath. Later that night, Elara wrote again in her notebook. The ink spread across the page like rain on glass. She wrote, "He thinks survival and living are the same word. One day he will learn the difference." Down the hall, Adrian stood in his office, the lights dim, the rain whispering outside. He glanced toward the monitor that showed the greenhouse camera. The image flickered once, then went dark as he turned it off. For the first time in years, he chose not to watch. He simply stood there, listening to the storm fade, realizing that silence could sound different when someone else was breathing inside it. The storm that night came without warning. Wind pressed against the glass walls, rain drummed in steady rhythm, and the Vale residence glowed faintly in the darkness like a lantern in a sea of thunder. Elara Brooks sat awake in her room, unable to sleep. The house felt alive in the storm, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. She walked to the window and watched lightning streak across the sky. Each flash revealed a reflection of herself surrounded by a world that looked perfect but felt hollow. Somewhere down the hall, a faint sound broke the quiet, a piano note, soft and uncertain, like a memory. She froze. Adrian had told her the West Wing was off limits. That was where the sound was coming from. Curiosity and instinct overruled caution. She slipped into the hallway, the floor cold beneath her bare feet. The mansion was darker than usual, lights dimmed to conserve energy during the storm. As she moved deeper into the west corridor, the air grew colder. The walls here were different, no art, no mirrors, only bare glass that reflected shadows. At the end of the hall, she found a door slightly ajar. A faint glow spilled through the crack. Elara hesitated, then pushed it open. Inside was a room frozen in time. Dust floated in the air like ash. A grand piano sat near the window, its keys yellowed, a thin layer of dust covering the lid. Framed photographs lined the walls. A young girl with dark hair, smiling beside a piano, sometimes next to a younger Adrian. The same face appeared again in newspaper clippings pinned to the far wall. She stepped closer and read the headlines. Charity Gala Tragedy, Prodigy Pianist Dies in Collapse. Vale Family Foundation under investigation. Her chest tightened. The girl was his sister. The dates were 15 years old. She picked up one of the papers on the table. Someone had circled a sentence in red ink. Negligence suspected in construction oversight by Vale senior staff. The sound of footsteps made her turn. Adrian stood in the doorway, drenched from the rain, his expression unreadable but his eyes darker than she had ever seen. "You were not supposed to be here," he said quietly. "I heard music," she answered. "I thought someone was hurt." His voice sharpened. "You do not get to touch this part of my life." She held the paper in her hands. "Your sister was the musician." His jaw clenched. "She was the only person who believed beauty could fix everything." Elara's tone softened. "And you believe it destroyed her?" He took a step closer, the air between them heavy with storm and grief. "It did. The stage collapsed because of the foundation's oversight. My father signed the contracts. She died in front of an audience that came to watch her play. Do you understand what it means to see love become a weakness?" Her voice trembled but did not break. "It means you stopped letting anything close enough to hurt you again." His breathing was uneven now, the wall of control cracking around the edges. "You have no idea what guilt feels like when it wears your last name." She looked around the room. "You turned it into a shrine and a prison at the same time. Because forgetting does not erase what happened," he said. "Neither does punishing yourself forever," she replied. "You are not protecting her memory, you are strangling it." For a long moment, the rain was the only sound. He stood still, his fists tight at his sides, eyes fixed on the piano. Finally, he spoke, voice barely above a whisper. "She wanted me to keep playing after she was gone. I tried once. I could not even touch the keys." Elara walked to the piano, wiped a line through the dust, and pressed one note. The sound was soft, fragile, human. "Then let her forgive you," she said. "Let her music live again." Adrian turned away, his shoulders shaking. For the first time since she had met him, he looked like a man instead of a monument. "Leave this room, Elara," he said quietly. "Please." She placed the newspaper back on the table. "You cannot heal from what you refuse to face." He did not answer. The silence that followed was heavier than anger, deeper than grief. She stepped past him and back into the hall, the echo of that single piano note following her all the way to her room. When she closed her door, she leaned against it, trembling. In the reflection of the window, lightning flashed again, and she saw both of them, herself and the man who had built a life out of walls, each standing alone in their separate prisons of glass. In the west wing, Adrian remained in the forbidden room. He sat on the piano bench, staring at the photograph of his sister. The storm outside began to ease, the rain softening to a drizzle. He reached out one hand, touched a single key, and let it sound. The note was uneven, broken at first, then clearer. He stayed there long after the echo faded, trying to remember what forgiveness was supposed to feel like. And for the first time, the silence in the Vale mansion did not feel like order. It felt like mourning. The morning after the storm, the house was quiet again, but not the same kind of quiet as before. The Vale residence no longer felt perfectly balanced. It felt as if the air itself had shifted, carrying the echo of a single piano note that refused to fade. Elara Brooks moved through the kitchen early, helping the staff arrange breakfast trays. The workers greeted her with shy smiles, still remembering the short lessons she had given them. When she turned, she found Adrian standing at the doorway, his sleeves rolled, no tie, no folder in hand. It was the first time she had seen him without his armor of professionalism. "Good morning," she said softly. He nodded once. "You are awake early." "I could not sleep," she replied. The storm left too many thoughts behind. He glanced toward the coffee pot. "May I join you?" The question startled her, but she pulled out a chair. He poured his own coffee, the silence between them more natural now, almost fragile. After a few moments, she said quietly, "I went into the West Wing last night." He looked up but did not stop her. "I know I should not have," she continued, "but I think that room has been asking for someone to listen for a long time." His gaze was distant. "That room was built for memory. I did not realize how loud memory could become. It does not need to be loud," she said. "It just needs to be heard." He leaned back, studying her face as if searching for anger and finding only calm. "You speak as if you understand pain." She gave a faint smile. "Everyone who teaches learns it first." For the first time, his mouth softened into something that almost resembled a smile. "You are not what I expected." "Neither are you," she replied. The clock ticked softly. He finished his coffee and said, "There is something I want to show you." He led her through a corridor she had not seen before, to a small studio filled with old blueprints and mechanical parts. On the far wall, a model of the Vale Foundation building stood under glass. "This is what I built to fix everything," he said. "The company, the charity, the image, every piece of it was designed to make sure no one could ever accuse me of being weak again." "And did it work?" she asked. "It kept me alive," he answered. "That is not the same thing as living," she said. He turned toward her, the distance between them smaller than ever. "You make everything sound simple." I make it sound possible," she said. Something in his composure wavered. He looked down at his hands, then back at her. "I have spent years controlling everything. I do not know how to stop." "You start small," she said. "One rule at a time." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small piece of white chalk. It was worn smooth from years of use. "When my students broke a rule, I made them write a new one. You should try." He stared at the chalk in her open palm. "What would I even write?" "Anything that feels real," she said. "Something you have never allowed yourself to say." He took it carefully, turning it between his fingers. "This feels strange," he said. "It should," she replied. "It means it matters." For a long moment, they stood in silence, the air thick with unsaid thoughts. Finally, he spoke. "Rule number 6, he said quietly. "Allow the possibility of forgiveness." Her breath caught. "That is a good one." He looked at her, and this time there was no distance in his eyes. "You should know something," he said. "Since you came here, the silence in this house no longer feels like peace. It feels like waiting." Elara did not look away. "Then stop waiting." His hand tightened around the chalk. The moment stretched, fragile and full. Neither moved. That night, after the house went dark, the security cameras in the main hallway flickered off one by one. Elara walked past the piano room and found Adrian there, standing beside the open window. The air smelled like rain and cedar. He did not speak at first. Then he said, "I have avoided this place for 15 years. She stepped closer. "And now you are here." "I am here," he said almost to himself. She reached out and touched one of the piano keys. "It still remembers her," she said. He placed his hand beside hers, their fingers almost touching. "So do I." Neither pulled away. In that stillness, they did not kiss. They did not need to. The distance between them dissolved in the quiet understanding that sometimes breaking a rule did not mean losing control, it meant reclaiming it. When she finally turned to leave, he said, "Thank you, Elara." "For what?" she asked. "For reminding me that silence is not the same as peace." As she walked back to her room, she noticed the small mark of chalk he had drawn on the wall beside the piano, a single line that curved upward like the beginning of a signature. In the morning, she would find the cameras in the hallway still dark, and the house still standing. But something fundamental had shifted. The Vale mansion, once perfect and untouchable, had begun to breathe. And so had he. The calm that followed lasted less than 2 days. On the third morning, Elara Brooks woke to the sound of voices in the hallway. The staff moved quickly, whispering to one another, their faces pale. She stepped out of her room and found Adrian Vale standing at the bottom of the staircase, holding a tablet in one hand. His expression was not anger, but disbelief. He turned the screen toward her. A headline blazed across every news site in the country. "The Vale marriage contract. Teacher or gold digger?" Below it was a photograph taken through the greenhouse window, her face turned toward him as he stood too close. The moment frozen in a way that looked far more intimate than it had been. Elara felt her stomach tighten. "Who took that?" "It does not matter," he said, voice steady but cold. The board is demanding a statement. The investors want assurance that this is not a scandal. And what will you tell them? She asked quietly. He looked at her, and she could see the conflict in his eyes. I will tell them it was nothing more than a contractual arrangement, that you have no involvement with my company beyond what was agreed. Her voice trembled. You mean you will deny that I matter at all? His jaw tightened. This is about protecting what I have built. Everything depends on control. Control is what broke you, she said, the words leaving her before she could stop them. He turned sharply. Do not speak to me as if you understand my life. You do not know what it costs to hold power in a world that waits for you to fall. She stepped closer, her tone calm but firm. And you do not know what it costs to live without it. For a long moment, they stood in silence. The distance between them heavy with everything that had changed and everything that had not. Finally, he said, when this week ends, I will make sure you are protected. You will not be mentioned again. The foundation will still receive its funding. You can leave this place and start over. Her eyes filled with something he could not name disappointment, perhaps sorrow. And you will go back to pretending you are untouchable. He did not answer. The storm outside began to rise again, as if the weather itself knew the script. That evening, Elara packed her small suitcase. She paused only once, by the piano in the hallway. The mark of chalk he had drawn there still glowed faintly under the soft light. She touched it gently, then turned away. When she stepped out of the house, the rain was falling again, hard and relentless. The driver opened the door, but she hesitated before getting in. She looked back toward the glass walls of the mansion. Through the reflection, she could see Adrian standing by the window, watching. Neither of them moved. Inside, Adrian stood alone in the silence he had rebuilt around himself. The news channels were still broadcasting, the commentators dissecting every frame of the photograph. His assistant called to remind him of the press conference scheduled for the next morning. He agreed without listening. As the night deepened, the storm outside grew louder, battering against the windows like a heartbeat he could not silence. For the first time, he realized the truth. He had lost the one person who had seen him not as a name or a power, but as a man. And yet, the rules he had written still held him hostage. When dawn arrived, Adrian stood before the mirror, tie perfectly straight, mask perfectly in place. He was ready to face the world again, ready to lie one more time to keep the illusion alive. But somewhere inside him, a single note still echoed, faint and human, refusing to die. The next morning, the Vale Corporation headquarters was surrounded by reporters. Cameras flashed under gray skies, and the sound of rain mixed with the hum of voices waiting for a statement. Inside, Adrian Vale walked through the marble lobby with measured steps, his reflection gliding across the polished floor. Every movement was practiced, but his mind was far from calm. In the boardroom, a dozen investors sat in silence. Their faces were sharp, their questions sharper. One of them spoke first. Mr. Vale, this story has gone global. The market is sliding. You need to contain it. Adrian looked at the headlines on the screen, his own face beside Elara's, their names entangled in gossip. I will handle it, he said. The press conference begins in 30 minutes. When the meeting ended, he stood alone by the window. The city below looked smaller than usual, like a model of the empire he had spent years building. It had once made him feel powerful. Now it only felt empty. He took a deep breath and walked to the auditorium. The air was heavy with expectation. Rows of cameras faced the podium, and reporters whispered, waiting for him to begin. He had prepared a speech precise, emotionless, safe. It lay on the podium in front of him, every word crafted to protect the company and erase her name. He looked at the first line, then at the sea of faces beyond the glass. He folded the paper in half and set it aside. When he spoke, his voice was clear but unsteady. There is something I need to say, and it is not in the notes I was given. The room quieted instantly. Yes, he said. There was a contract. It was my idea. I wrote it because I believed control could protect me. I believed rules could keep me from feeling anything again. He paused, the sound of the rain outside filling the silence. I met a woman who agreed to that contract. She had nothing to gain and everything to lose. And in 7 days, she did what I could not do in 7 years. She made me remember what honesty sounds like. A murmur moved through the crowd, but he continued. I built an empire on rules that suffocated the people who worked for me. I built a house that was quiet enough to hide a broken heart. She walked into that silence and taught me that control is not strength. kindness is. One of the reporters stood. Are you saying the marriage was real? Adrian met the reporter's eyes. It became real the moment I started to care, and it is the only truth I have left to give you. The flashes erupted again, brighter now. Adrian did not flinch. I am stepping down from my position effective immediately. Vale Industries will continue under new leadership. The glass tower that once carried my name will be turned into a community center for education and art, the very things that remind people they are alive. He exhaled, the first true breath he had taken in years. If you are looking for a scandal, you can print this instead. A man forgot how to feel and met someone brave enough to remind him. He left the stage to stunned silence. Outside, the storm had slowed to a drizzle, the air clean and sharp. At that same moment, across the city, Elara stood in the community shelter, watching the live broadcast on a small television. The chalk in her hand trembled, leaving a faint white streak across the table. When he said her name, she pressed a hand to her mouth. For the first time, she realized he had not just broken the rules, he had broken free. And in doing so, he had opened the world to something new, something that looked a lot like grace. 3 months later, spring returned to Chicago. The sky was clear again, and sunlight stretched across the rebuilt top floor of Hale Tower. Where the Vale executive offices once stood, there was now a vast open space filled with plants, whiteboards, and children's laughter. The sign at the entrance read, "The Vale Learning Greenhouse." Elara Brooks stood near the wide window, helping a small boy write his name for the first time. The room smelled of chalk, soil, and new beginnings. She had returned to teaching, but this time, the classroom reached higher than any she had known before. Around her, volunteers and families moved through the space, planting small trees, arranging books, turning glass into something human again. Behind her, a familiar voice said softly, "You still prefer mornings to start with chalk." She turned. Adrian Vale stood a few steps away, wearing rolled sleeves and no tie, his eyes calm for the first time since she had met him. "You came," she said. "I promised I would help rebuild," he replied. "Besides, I wanted to see what you have done with this place." She smiled. "We did it together. You just finally opened the windows." He laughed quietly. "No, you broke them first." They stood side by side, looking out over the city. Below them, the glass towers reflected the light, not as barriers but as mirrors catching the sky. Elara reached into her pocket and pulled out a small pendant that shimmered in the sunday. It was made of melted glass mixed with chalk dust, a symbol forged from everything that had once separated them. She placed it in his hand. "This is for you," she said, "so you will remember what forgiveness feels like." He looked at it for a long time, then closed his fingers around it. "I do not need the reminder," he said quietly, "but I will keep it anyway." Children ran past them, their laughter echoing through the greenhouse. For a moment, both of them simply listened. The sound was imperfect, spontaneous, alive. Elara said, "You know, when I first arrived, I thought this house was made of glass to keep the world out. But now I think it was waiting for someone to see through it." Adrian looked at her, his voice gentle. "Then we both learned how to see." Outside, the afternoon light touched every building in sight. It shone through the glass, turning it gold, as if the whole city had learned how to breathe again. A soft breeze carried the sound of laughter upward. Elara closed her notebook, her heart steady. When she spoke, her words felt like a promise. When the heart heals, the world learns to follow. The camera of the world's eyes might have turned away, but the story did not end in headlines. It ended here in light, in kindness, in the quiet victory of two people who chose to build something living from the ruins of silence. And for the first time, the Vale Tower did not reflect power. It reflected hope.